In a world where religion and politics intertwine, one institution stands unrivaled: the Vatican. Beneath its sacred facade lies an empire, one whose foundations stretch back to antiquity and whose influence remains undiminished. The Roman Empire did not collapse, it was baptized. The Church inherited not only its structure, but its ambition as well, as explained by James Carroll in Constantine's Sword. The Vatican has never been merely a house of worship. It is a sovereign force, moving beyond borders with indifference to the laws that govern nations. From medieval monarchs to modern statesmen, it has shaped the currents of history, often from the shadows. Peter de Rosa, in Vicars of Christ, concluded that the papacy is not a spiritual authority alone. It's one of the longest surviving institutions of statecraft the world has known. How did a seat of faith become a throne of global power? How did imperial ambition survive the fall of Rome, reborn under the garments of religion? To uncover the Vatican's true nature, we must trace its rise, not through theology, but through empire. The year is 325 CE. The Roman Empire, once invincible, now teeters on the edge of collapse. Constantine, a ruler facing a fractured realm, sees in Christianity not salvation, but strategy. Seeking unity, he convenes the First Council of Nicaea, where belief is not merely affirmed, but standardized. Through this council, Christianity is molded not by divine will, but by imperial decree. Christianity was transformed from a countercultural sect into a pillar of empire when it aligned itself with Roman power. As described by Karen Armstrong in A History of God. The Nicene Creed, crafted under Constantine's gaze, is less a confession of faith and more a tool of control. By merging church and state, a new empire is born. Not the Roman Empire of old, but a Christian empire, crowned by Rome's fallen laurels. As the Western Roman Empire crumbles, the Church stands ready to inherit its legacy. The Pope emerges, not merely as shepherd of souls, but as Caesar in robes. The Vatican becomes the new Rome, an empire cloaked in sanctity. H.G. Wells, in The Outline of History, outlined that the early church was modelled on the Roman Empire. Bishops were its governors, and the Pope was its emperor. But this new empire is not like the ones before it. This empire thrives on the manipulation of faith, transforming kings into willing servants of a divine mission. The fall of Rome in 476 CE leaves a vacuum in the West. While the Byzantines endure in the East, the Vatican rises, seizing the mantle of power. By the 8th century, the papacy had become the most powerful institution in Italy, not because of theology, but because of land, alliances, and politics, as defined by Thomas F.X. Noble in the Republic of St. Peter. In 800 CE, Pope Leo III crowns Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor. This is no act of piety, it is a declaration. The Pope will decide who rules Europe. By the 11th century, the transformation is complete. The Papal States expand. The Church amasses land, wealth, and kings who bow before the Pope, not merely in faith, but in fealty. Barbara W. Tuchman, in A Distant Mirror, revealed that the Pope's control over temporal matters was as absolute as his spiritual authority. To cross him was to risk both throne and soul. The investiture controversy of 1075 crystallizes the Vatican's supremacy. Allegedly a dispute over appointing bishops, it is in truth a battle for dominion. The Pope emerges supreme, kingmaker, lawgiver, sovereign above sovereigns. But spiritual dominance was never the Vatican's final ambition. In 1095, the First Crusade is launched. Under the banner of the Cross, Europe's nobility marches east under the guise of liberating the Holy Land. In reality, it is to conquer, to plunder, and to expand the Vatican's imperial reach. The Crusades were not merely military expeditions. They were ecclesiastical projects of colonization, sanctioned by divine authority. As explained by Christopher Tyerman, in God's War, a new history of the Crusades. The Crusades unleash centuries of sanctioned violence, conquest, and exploitation. Slavery, once condemned, becomes a church-sanctioned enterprise. Whole populations are seized, traded, and enslaved with papal blessing. Mark Gregory Pegg, in A Most Holy War, described that the papacy's blessing transformed the taking of land and lives into acts of piety. The blood of unbelievers was a tithe unto God. The cost is staggering. Across the Crusade period, over 1 million Muslims, Jews, and Orthodox Christians are killed in massacres, sieges, and retaliatory campaigns. The bloody conquest of Jerusalem sees an estimated 40,000 to 70,000 men, women, and children slaughtered in the streets. Crusaders, led by Pope Urban II's call, lay waste to entire cities in the name of Christendom. In total, the Crusades across multiple campaigns claimed the lives of approximately 3 million people, including countless civilians, soldiers, and those caught in the crossfire of religious wars. But the slaughter does not end with the Crusades. In the 15th century, the age of exploration begins. A new form of crusade. Spain, Portugal, and other Catholic powers carve up the New World. Their conquests was legitimized by papal bulls. The Vatican's reach extends far beyond Europe, and with it comes the decimation of indigenous populations. Up to 90% of the indigenous populations of the Americas are wiped out due to violence, exploitation, and disease brought by the colonizers. It's estimated that up to 100 million indigenous people perished as a result of European colonization. Papal bulls, such as Inter Caetera, laid the theological and legal groundwork for European conquest of non-Christian lands. As outlined by Robert A. Williams, Jr. in The American Indian in Western Legal Thought. The transatlantic slave trade begins to take hold, sanctioned by the Vatican through bulls like Dum Diversas and Romanus Pontifex. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, an estimated 12 to 15 million Africans are forcibly taken from their homeland and sold into slavery in the Americas. The Vatican's complicity is irrefutable as it blesses the ships, the land, and the enterprise that fuels this system. The Church profits from the sweat and blood of enslaved men and women, as Catholic monarchs and merchants carve out empires of unimaginable wealth. David Bryan Davis, in Inhuman Bondage, defined that the Church's endorsement of slavery gave moral cover to the most inhumane enterprise in human history. The Vatican doesn't need armies to control its subjects. The kings and emperors, bound by divine blessing, willingly fight wars, expand territories, and extend papal power under the illusion of sacred duty. A few monarchs resisted, but most complied. The Church is both a moral and material force, its grip tightening through the bloody history of imperialism. But strip away the mask of piety, and the pattern becomes clear. The Vatican has never just wielded power. It has redefined the very nature of authority. Through the blessing of kings, the Vatican elevated itself above the monarchs it served. A king who is crowned by the Pope does not simply receive the authority of the crown. He receives the authority of God, mediated through the Vatican. The Pope became the maker of kings, and kings, in turn, became the Pope's most obedient instruments. As revealed by R.W. Southern in Western Society and the Church in the Middle Ages. This blessing was no mere ceremonial act. It was the divine consolidation of imperial power. In this way, the Vatican turned kings into its vassals. Subjects who did not just obey the Pope out of loyalty, but out of spiritual duty. The coronation of kings by the Pope fused divine and political authority in a way that placed papal power above all. As explained by Walter Ullmann in The Growth of Papal Government in the Middle Ages. The Vatican became the unseen ruler, pulling the strings from behind a veil of sanctity. In this dynamic, the Pope was not just a religious figure. He was the emperor of a new empire, whose dominion extended through the devotion of kings. The Crusades were not acts of faith, but expansions of territory. The Vatican didn't merely urge its followers to spread Christianity, it weaponized belief. What Christians saw as a sacred mission to liberate the Holy Land was, in truth, a ruthless campaign of conquest. The Crusades were not a campaign of piety, but of politics, power, and the acquisition of territory. As described by Christopher Tyerman in The Crusades, a very short introduction. The Pope did not present the Crusades as an imperial endeavor. He presented them as divine service. The expansion of Christianity was framed as a moral duty, making the conquest not a political or military endeavor, but a spiritual necessity. Christopher J. H. Wright, in The Mission of God, revealed that by framing conquest as devotion, the papacy ensured willing participation in holy war across centuries. This reframing made it far more powerful than any empire's obligation to expand. It wasn't about the Pope's ambition, but God's will. The Vatican didn't need to enforce this mission. Its vassals followed it willingly, seeing their imperial conquests as sacred duty. The Vatican's most dangerous weapon was its ability to extract wealth not through force, but through spiritual coercion. The vassal kingdoms of Europe didn't merely pay taxes, they offered tribute in hopes of receiving divine favor. The richer a kingdom became, the more they gave to the Vatican, an act they saw not as a tax, but as an offering to God. The sale of indulgences and tributes became a mechanism of control, fusing salvation with economic dependence. As outlined by Ewan Cameron in the European Reformation. The Vatican didn't need to enforce these gifts. The subjects gave them willingly, believing that more tribute meant more blessings. The Pope, in his divine role, didn't need to send soldiers to collect taxes. He didn't need to threaten rebellion. His subjects gave more than was asked happily, because they believed it was for their eternal salvation. John Julius Norwich, in The Popes, A History, described that the medieval society paid the Pope for blessings, the same way a vassal pays tribute to a king. This system of voluntary submission, disguised as divine service, was far more insidious than any empire's military conquest. At the heart of it lies a simple truth. The Vatican did not conquer through legions, but through doctrine. Not through swords, but through decrees. Paul L. Williams, in The Vatican Exposed, described the Vatican as not merely a spiritual headquarters, but a sovereign entity with the instruments of a nation-state. The Pope stands not as humble servant, but as Caesar reborn. The Vatican, a sovereign city-state, commands its own bank, army, and diplomatic corps. Its influence reaches across continents. Subtle, yet unyielding. The clergy serve not merely as pastors, but as administrators of empire. The tithe, presented as sacred offering, operates as imperial taxation, fueling the machinery of power. The tithe system was a religious form of taxation levied in the name of God, as exposed by Barbara Tuchman in The March of Folly. Through Crusades, colonization, and global expansion, the Vatican weaponized faith, constructing a world order not of divine will, but of papal supremacy. Its deadliest weapon? Subtlety, not through open conquest, but through spiritual dominion. It steers the destinies of kings and nations alike. This is the empire few dare to name. Today, the Vatican's imperial nature persists. Evolved, but undiminished. The Vatican maintains soft power across the globe through a network of diplomacy, doctrine, and finance. As explained by John L. Allen Jr. in All the Pope's Men. Though it no longer commands armies, its reach extends through diplomacy, finance, and global governance. Catholic majority nations orbit its influence, often subordinating national will to papal authority. Tithes flow. Clergy wield power. Papal directives shape policies from immigration to climate accords. The methods have changed, but the ambition has not. Matthew Fox, in The Pope's War, outlined that though its armies are gone, the Church's ability to influence law, policy, and geopolitics remains unmatched. The Vatican's empire is no longer hidden. Its legacy is carved into the bones of history. The question is no longer whether the Vatican rules as an empire. The question is, will you remain a subject within it? The choice is yours.